the nature of the Panther is to be defensive. And so the Black Panther Party, when it first started, was called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And Bobby and Huey put together a 10-point program. And the 10-point program outlined what the Black Panther Party wanted and what we believed. And on that 10-point program, things like we want land, bread, housing, justice, education, and peace. We want an end to the murder of Black people at the hands of police. We want an end to the robbery of our communities by the capitalists within our communities. We want all men and women held, Black men and women held in federal, state, county, city prisons and jails to be released because they have not had a fair trial. And we want Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried by a jury of their peers as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. But there were 10 points. And the 10-point program became the basis for which all of our organizing would grow and would emerge from through that 10-point program. And so the goal was to establish a Black political party that represented Black people, and at the same time to defend them until such time that they had enough power to take over the control, economic and political control of their own community. And so that was the goal of the Black Panther Party. That was the reason why the Black Panther Party was formed. We didn't form to go out and attack the federal government. You know, we would defend ourselves. But through organizing within our community and with coalitions with other communities, the goal would be to replace what was in Washington, D.C., because it was not working. And we would do that in a nonviolent way. But at the same time, if we were attacked, we would defend ourselves. And so in that summer of 1968, when we started the Seattle chapter, the Black Panther Party was a local organization in Oakland, California, with a chapter in LA. And by the end of that summer, the Black Panther Party had chapters and branches all across the country in every major city. We, in almost all of the 48 contiguous United States. We had, by the end of '69, we had the international section of the Black Panther Party in Algeria. We had Black Panther parties in New Zealand, Australia, London, support groups in the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, Japan, in a coalition with the People's Republic of China, with the ANC in South Africa, a group in Zimbabwe, in Angola, in Mozambique. We were a worldwide organization with connections all across the globe. And by the end of the summer of 1968, J. Edgar Hoover named us the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States. When we joined the party, Huey, Bobby, because Huey was locked up at the time, Bobby told us that we had to read 2 hours a day and that we had to attend political education classes at least twice a week. And so he was preparing us to be, and we were preparing ourselves to be revolutionaries with sound revolutionary principle and thought. You know, these movies that depict Black Panthers as stupid and ignorant or racist are distortions of who we really were, distorting the truth about the Black Panther Party so that not only white America, but Black Americans and any other Americans would be afraid of us. But Huey taught us that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. And what that meant, that if you could define the conditions within your community through analysis, then you could effectively change that condition, and that was power. So the very first program that the Black Panther Party started was in response to the murders that were happening in the Black community at the hands of racist police. And it was the Police Alert Patrol. And the Police Alert Patrol was where we would take a cadre of Panthers armed with a shotgun and a law book. And we would go out and we would patrol the police. And and if in fact we saw them attempting to brutalize a citizen or murder them, we would stop them. And we were very effective. And the police didn't like it, and certainly the J. Edgar Hoover didn't like it. But there's a story that I heard Bobby Seale tell about the first police alert patrol. And this was in Oakland in 1966, late 1966, early 1967. And it's a Saturday night on East 14th Street. East 14th Street being a very busy section of the Black community where people would come out and party on Friday and Saturday nights. And streets were full of people. And a cop car rolls through, and incidentally, a lot of the cops that were in Oakland at the time had been recruited out of the Jim Crow South, white cops, and they brought with them their Jim Crow racism. On this particular night, a cop car rolls down the street, and there's a guy that's kind of tipsy walking down the sidewalk, bouncing around, and so the cops jump out and they grab him and they rouse the crowd away, and they grab him and they slam him up against the car, and they start bopping him with the billy club and saying, "Straighten your legs out, get up against the car and get spread eagle," and bopping him every 2 or 3 seconds. And right at that moment, out of the shadows marched 10 leather-jacketed and berated Black Panthers with shotgun bandoleros across their chest, a shotgun in one hand and a law book in the other. And they stand right on the curb, right adjacent to where this is happening. And one of the cops looks up and sees them, and he says, "What are you niggas doing with them guns?" And Huey says to him, California law number 54681 states that we have a right to observe you carry out your duty. And we're going to observe you, and if you attempt to brutalize that man or attempt to kill him, we're going to stop you. And the cop says, "Like hell you are." And he reaches towards Huey and he says, "Give me that gun, nigga." And Huey says, "This is my property," and he jacks around into the chamber. And all of the other Panthers standing there at attention jack their rounds into the chamber. And everybody freezes. And the cop backs up and he motions to his partner to let the guy go, and they hop into their car and they drive away. Bobby described that as defining phenomena and making it act in a desired manner. That came right out of point number 7 of the 10-point program. We want an immediate end to the murder of Black people in our streets. So we were revolutionary practitioners. We were not armchair revolutionaries. We went out and we did what we talked about doing. So we stopped police murder in our community. That was the very first program that we started. And Huey said that people in our communities will not survive building a revolutionary movement because we're under constant attack. And he said, in order to capture the hearts and minds of the people, we need to organize within our community and understand what their needs are. The very next program, we had a police alert patrol here in Seattle that I ran along with other comrades. And so the very next program that we started was the Children's Free Breakfast Program. In February of 1969, the first breakfast program opened first in Oakland, and then following a day or so later here in Seattle, and then all across the country. And we had done an analysis of our community and saw that young Black kids were not getting fed in the morning before they went to school. So we organized the Children's Free Breakfast Program. We ended up with 5 breakfast programs in Seattle, and we fed 2,000 kids a hot breakfast every week. And the kids, it didn't matter what color they were. We didn't say free breakfast for Black kids. It was free breakfast for children. We fed white kids, we fed Black kids, we fed Latino kids, we fed Asian kids, whoever came into the breakfast program. But there was one thing that was consistent beyond getting a good, healthy breakfast, was that we told them that they were kings and queens, and that they were worthy, and that they were somebody, and that they needed to be proud of who they were. And we gave those kids hope and we gave them dignity and we gave them pride when they came in and ate those breakfasts. Made sure that they had done their homework the night before we sent them out the door to go to school. And so that began kind of the legacy of what we called the community survival programs. We had a number of community survival programs. We had as many as 60. In Seattle, we started a free medical clinic in 1970, and the free medical clinic is still operating today as the Carolyn Downs Family Medical Center, 50 years later, offering healthcare long before Obama came along, and effectively, I might add, on a sliding scale or free to those that can't afford it. And it's still operating 50 years later.
Yeah, both programs are a testament, I think, to the other side of the story that most people don't know.
Most people don't know. We had numerous programs, Paul. We had a free busing to prisons program where relatives who could not visit their loved ones in prison and maintain a connection, we formed a free busing to prisons program here and across the country. We weren't the only chapter that did it. We served the 5 prisons in the state, going weekly to the local prisons and then monthly to Walla Walla, twice a month to Walla Walla. We also then organized a prison tutoring program where we took busloads of students from the University of Washington in to tutor the inmates so that they could get their GEDs so that they would have a chance at a job when they got out of prison. We had a free legal aid program. We had a free shoe program, or free clothing program. We had started the first free food banks in the area. We had a free food program that gave away food every week. We had a senior aid program. We had started a pest control program where we went in and eliminated rats and roaches from people's homes, an environmental safety and cleanup program. One chapter had a free ambulance program. We just had, we investigated where the need was in our community and then began to act on those things and do something about them. We gave rise to sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia no one paid attention to it. A lot of people, Black people didn't even know what it was, although it primarily affected Black people. So in 1970, when we started our free clinic, we launched a free sickle cell anemia screening program. We tested thousands of people across the state. We tested all of the inmates in all of the prisons. And years later, today, there are actually cures for sickle cell anemia because of what the party did back in 1970. People think that the free lunch program and free breakfast program in schools was started by the federal government. We were murdered because we started the free breakfast program. We embarrassed the federal government into having a free breakfast program. And so, the range of work that we did across the full spectrum to organize within our community, most people have never heard of. But that was the real work of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, that's a fascinating history. And it makes me wonder what connections, Mr. Dixon, you see between some of the work that the Black Panther Party did back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and to some of the work that the Black Lives Matter movement is doing today. In what ways do you see those two movements as similar, and in what ways do you see those two movements as different?
Let me start by saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is one that is needed, obviously with what's going on across and has been going on across the country. And the similarity, I think, is that people have the courage to stand up and do something rather than just sit and talk about it and to draw attention to their issue. I will say that one of the things that I've often talked about with them is the need for them to be better organized. They don't have a central leadership. We had a central committee. Our foundation was our 10-point platform and program. They have no such. And that would allow them to be a stronger and I believe, a more well-organized organization. but I don't criticize them. I only offer suggestions. The other thing that was different was the way that we were attacked. When J. Edgar Hoover named us the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States and relaunched COINTELPRO, which was the acronym for the counterintelligence program that he started in the 1920s to first combat what he called the communist threat. He used it to union bust in the 1940s. He used it to, during the McCarthy era, to blackball actors out of Hollywood. And he used it at the start of the civil rights movement to harass and follow Martin Luther King and other leaders, even the Kennedys. But in 1968, when he relaunched COINTELPRO against the Black Panther Party, it was unlike anything that anyone had seen before. In an infamous memo that was exposed during, at the onset of the Freedom of Information Act in 1970-71, the memo exposed that he had sent across the country to all of his field offices was to disrupt, discredit, and destroy the activities of what he called Black hate groups and prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. So there was through the use of agent provocateurs and FBI informants, he launched an effort to basically wipe out the Black Panther Party. And he designated the first three cities for elimination were LA, Chicago, and Seattle. And in LA in January of 1969, through an FBI agent provocateur by the name of Ron Karenga, who is credited with starting Kwanzaa, he murdered Bunchy Carter and John Huggins. Bunchy Carter was the head of the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party and the LA chapter, and John Huggins was his deputy. They were shot in the back on the campus of UCLA. I attended both of their funerals. And the reason why they were such a big threat is because Bunchy Carter had been the former head of the largest gang in Southern California, the Slossons. And the FBI feared that if he ever organized those 5,000 gang members, that they would be in big trouble. So they murdered him pretty quickly. By January, and later that year, in December of 1969, with the help of an FBI informant who, by the way, was Fred Hampton's bodyguard and head of security for the Illinois State Chapter, they murdered Fred Hampton in his while he was sleeping in his bed. He had been drugged by the agent the night before, as had been the 30 other Panthers in the office. He had drew a diagram of Fred Hampton's apartment, where his bed was, what side of the bed he slept on, and began firing through the walls when they showed up in the middle of the night, knowing that they were drugged. And when they finally went into the apartment, Mark Clark, who was the head of Peoria chapter, had been shot through the head. And they went straight back to Fred Hampton's bedroom. There in the bed next to him was his future wife. She married him posthumously, Deborah. And when Deborah, she was 6 months pregnant at the time. And fortunately, she had not been shot in the torso, but she had been hit in the legs. And so when they drug her out of the bedroom, she heard them ask, "Is he dead yet?" And they said, "No, he's still breathing. He's got a pulse." And so several of the rounds of information she heard several other rounds from their weapons go off as they shot him point blank in the head. And she heard them saying, "He's good and dead now." That's premeditated murder. Days later, they attacked the LA office, and the LA Panthers fought them to a standstill for 4 hours. And after the 4 hours, they surrendered, at which point they were beaten and arrested and charged with attempted murder. The judge who heard the case listened to how the events unfolded and dismissed all of the charges against the Panthers, saying that from his observation, the police were the aggressors, which they were. Days after the LA office raid, they came to Seattle. And we didn't know they were coming. We were out on a routine day organizing in the community with breakfast programs and various other programs that we were doing and selling Panther papers. And we came back that afternoon, and the phone rang, and on the phone was a guy by the name of Don McGaffin. Don McGaffin was a well-respected reporter for Channel 4 Como News. And Don said, Elmer, I'm down here in the police station. I said, yeah. He said, they're getting their guns ready. They're coming after you. He said he was down there and they were loading up all their weapons and getting all their ammunition stacked up and getting ready. And he said, he asked them, he said, what are you guys getting ready to do? And they said, we're getting ready to go get those Dixon brothers tonight. And so we were put on red alert, which meant that rather than having regular guard duty, because we had regular guard duty in all of our offices, our walls in our offices were sandbagged. We had steel and plywood sandwiches on the window with gun flaps and chicken wire on when the gun flaps went up, so that tear gas grenades couldn't come into the office. We were well fortified, well armed, and had bulletproof vests and gas masks. And so we were on red guard waiting for them. And we had patrols outside, and the community was aware because we had a phone tree. They tried to attack our office a number of times. So we didn't know it, but at the time, the alcohol, firearms, and tobacco agents were in the mayor's office pleading with him for tactical support so they could attack the Panther office because they needed the Seattle police, which is why they were getting their weapons ready. They thought they were coming. And the mayor asked them, so why are you attacking their office? And the AFT agent said, because they've got illegal weapons. They said, our informants tell us that their weapons are illegal. And the mayor retorted, this is Mayor Wes Ullman. He said, no, my informant tells me that all of their weapons are legal, which they were. And he said to them, there will be no bloodbath in my city. You can look that article up in the newspaper. It was a famous article that appeared the next morning. So while we were waiting all night, they never came. They attempted to attack our office a couple of other times, and we were able to repel them by one means or another without weapons being fired. I used to have 2 bodyguards at all times when I was 17 and 18 years old. We lived under constant threat of assassination. There were at least 3 other assassination attempts on my brothers in my life, as were Panthers were murdered all across the country. So there's a clear difference in who we were and how much we were feared than the Black Lives Matter movement. But I give respect to them because they do stand up to fight for what a just cause and for what they believe.
So I'm struck by the age that you and your brother were when you went through all of this, and how much courage and persistence it took, and just clarity of thought, and having, strong principles to rely on, and deep knowledge of history and all of that. And I can't help but think that there will probably be some of our, students who are entering our university or who are currently in our university who are deeply passionate about doing something, about being socially active, about trying to combat, different forms of racism as they appear in their own personal lives and throughout society. So I wonder what advice you would give to, these students and these kids who are so passionate about some of these causes. What advice would you give them about ways they should think about having an impact in their own community or across society?
Well, a couple of things right away is to prepare themselves. Educate yourselves about revolutions, about political movements. in the past so that you don't make the same mistakes that we or others did. That's why Huey and Bobby made sure that we read 2 hours a day to study revolutionary movements across the globe. So preparing yourself is number one. Number two, in fact, that may be number two, but preparing yourself and then being fearless, having no fear and be committed. One of the things that I believe also separated the Black Panther Party was the amount of principle that we carried. We were very principled. For most of the Panthers, you could not buy us off. You couldn't deter us from our path. And that allowed us to maintain and protect ourselves and defend ourselves because we had those principles and we abided by the rules of the Black Panther Party. So you must have rules and principles. And I think thirdly, and that may be number three, I think fourthly, you have to know what you're about, and you need a foundation, and you need something that describes and states who you are and what you're about. That was the 10-point program. That's the thing that many organizations lack, is having that foundation and really spelling out what you stand for and what you believe, so that you have a path in front of you. That allows you to be flexible, but it also allows you to have a foundation. And without that foundation, you're not going to go in any direction that's going to be positive. You have to have a foundation. The last thing I would say is that, especially now more than ever, is that you have to build coalitions. Black Panther Party has started the original Rainbow Coalition. That was not Jesse Jackson. That was Fred Hampton that coined that phrase. And what he said was, we need power to the people. We need white power for white people, brown power for brown people, yellow power for yellow people, red power for red people, and black power for black people. We need all power to the people. And we had coalitions with the Brown Berets, the Young Chicanos. We had coalitions with white organizations, the Peace and Freedom Party, the SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, a group out of Appalachia known as the Young Patriots, who were poor Appalachian whites. We had coalitions with Asian Americans, the Red Guard, with Native Americans, AIM, the American Indian Movement, coalitions with people across the globe. And so building coalitions is key, because it is not, our struggle was not just about the injustices that happened to Black people, but it was about the injustices for all oppressed people. And so that gave us this strong base to operate from, because while we organized within the Black community, and we would tell young white students to organize within their communities, I think today there is a need for this broad coalition to organize across all communities, because of the conditions are affecting everyone. And so building broad-based coalitions is key, is critical. I want to share one picture before you ask your last or other question. And I don't know how well you can see that, but that's me at a rally. I was probably 18 years old in that picture. You can't see my shoulder holster underneath my jacket, but I want to show you the young woman standing looks like she's to the right of me, maybe to the left of me.
To the right.
And she's got a off the pig sign. That young woman is Karen Bodemer, a young white activist. She was probably about 12 years old. She was the first person to babysit a Panther kid, who was my nephew. When people say that the Black Panther Party was racist, I want you to notice the bodyguard that I have behind my comrade up on the podium, that he's white. That was part of the coalition that we were in. And she, in fact, was a neighborhood kid in Madrona who we trusted to babysit our kids. There's no way that we were a racist organization. That was part of the lies that the FBI and the media told to the press to get people to fear who we were. But people that knew us knew that that was the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, I've I've taken, you know, an hour and a half of your time, Mr. Dixon, but it is so, your story is so informative. And I think the level of detail that you went into about your experiences and about some of the things that the Black Panther Party did, you know, we could talk for another 2 hours easily. But I think it's so important for our students to understand that there is a far greater history there that maybe they have not been exposed to, and in their K-12 education or just in their day-to-day lives, that will help flesh out the way they read this common reading book that They Hate You Give, in which the 10-point program is fairly prominent in it. And so I just really I deeply appreciate you giving us your time and being willing to tell your story and to frame your experience in such a rich and meaningful way.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I would urge your students to read my brother's book, which is called My People Are Rising. And you can get a firsthand look and experience of what it was like being a member of the Black Panther Party through my brother's eyes. And this fall, my book will be out. It's called Die Standing. And you'll want to read that as well.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to make note of that and to pass that on.
All right.
Again, thank you so much, Mr. Dixon. Really appreciate your time. It's been an honor.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.